to Connecting Through Faith. I am your host, Reverend Andre Bennett, and I am so excited to begin this journey together as we explore how our faith connects us, as we explore how our faith inspires us to show up in the world, as we explore how our faith calls upon us to respond to the different challenges in life. But you know what? It's not all just about the doom and the gloom and the challenges of life. It's also making that connection as to how our faith inspires hope in us when the times are dark and gloomy. How our faith inspires hope and peace through some of life's raging moments. How our faith inspires joy and happiness when we are at some of our lowest points. I am excited to have conversations about the day, to have conversations with people from all walks of life. And you know what? To have conversations with those who are not necessarily people of faith, they're not connected to a faith, but they are so guided by their moral compass that they show up in the world and in different spaces ready to make the morally right decisions and choices that not only impact or affect them, but impact and affect all of us as a whole. The podcast is designed in 3 segments. So the first segment is Consider the Plug. And the plug is where we talk about the topic of the day. And during that time, I will try my best to make some connections to a bigger picture than just what the topic is, than just what the media conversation is. And then segment 2, my most exciting segment. This is where I get to talk with the guests, and I have a wonderful list of individuals lined up that are ready to sit and have deep, meaningful conversations about how we are all interconnected through our faith and by our moral compass. And then there is the closing thoughts, or if my producer heard this, he would scream, the connecting thoughts. This is where I will share, just little nuggets. I grew up, I was raised, and I've shared this over and over, and I'm very, very proud of this, by who I consider to be life's greatest teacher, my grandmother, who had but a 3rd grade education, but was one of the smartest women I've ever met, people that I've ever met in my entire life. She had some really valuable golden nuggets in quotes. And she would give me these little quotes when I was acting up as a child and they made no sense to me. But as I got older and as I assumed adulthood and adult life, and I got a greater understanding of what life really is and all of life's different circumstances and situations, these quotes from my grandmother begin to make perfect sense, and I've developed a greater sense of appreciation for them. And so I will share from time to time my closing thoughts, and a lot of my closing thoughts will be guided, one, by what's happening, but also, like I said, by some of the lessons that have been instilled in me by my grandmother, whose shoulders I stand on today. I'm so excited to get started, so here we go. Let's get to the plug. What is the plug for today? Well, it's the conversation that just keeps on giving. It's the slap that keeps slapping. The slap that was heard around the world almost 3 weeks ago, I think. Or maybe it's over 3 weeks, I'm not quite sure. We all heard it. It was at the Oscars when Chris Rock, being the funny guy that he is, stood up and made a comedic remark about Jada Pinkett Smith, Will Smith's wife, and Will wasn't too happy with his comments. And we all know the end of that story. Will got up on stage at the 94th Oscar and slapped the daylights out of Chris Rock on live television. And we have been living in that space, in that conversation ever since. Now, there has been, I believe, a series of conversations, a series of talk shows, a series of memes and GIFs and all GIFs and all these things about that slap. And some are in defense and support of Will Smith. Others are in stark rebuke of Will Smith. Some are in support and defense of Chris Rock. Others are just in awe of how he handled himself, not necessarily defending him, but just how admiring how he handled himself. Now, I've taken, I did do a live video and I talked about it, and I had someone come on and she asked a couple of questions. But I took the last couple of weeks, all the things that are in the media, all the, the Oscars last week came out and they said that they're banning Will Smith for 10 years and, movie deals have been removed from him and projects have been put on pause. And so it's just in the public sphere. I think his wife talk show premiered last night or yesterday, and that was the topic of conversation on that show. It's in the public sphere. So we can't get away from it. I've taken this time. I had initial stark condemnation for Will Smith. How dare he? That is so wrong. And I still believe wholeheartedly that it is wrong. And I still condemn the action. I do not condone the action. But I took the time to really reflect on some things, reading all the stuff that has been coming up. And to me, there are some stuff that jumped out, right? The low-hanging fruits, toxic masculinity, the hood nature, black and black crime, those are the low-hanging fruits. But the deeper and the higher hanging stuff, the deeper thing for me is where he was in that moment that no one except Will Smith knows. The other piece that really stood out to me is how Chris Rock showed up in that moment. That say what you feel about the guy, say what you feel about what he said. There is no one with any common decency, sense, or moral compass that can ever say anything except he handled himself in a stellarly way. Now, let's pick apart the Will Smith bit. Now, I come to you from the Christian faith. And so there are a lot of things that my faith says about the moment. You know what I mean? If your right hand offends you, cut it off. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, or some. But then there's Jesus. I'm a Christian, right? So Christ. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, then turn the left and give it to them. And I don't know about you, but I am still struggling with that piece. I want to have a conversation with Jesus when I see Jesus. Because listen, Jesus, I am not turning no cheek to nobody except my mama. Okay? That's the only person. And at this age, my mama has to be, she has to have a real good reason for me to turn the other cheek when she smack one. I'm going to take the smack on one, but I'm going to say, hey, what you do that for? You know what I mean? But that's besides the point. So my Christian faith sees this in two different ways, right? And so now I had to reconcile my faith with my humanity and with my own independent thinking and feelings. And here's where it is for me. Again, and it was someone very near and dear to me that helped me to get to this place. We don't know where Will Smith was, what was going on in his head, what all the things were leading up to that moment that caused that moment to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And we, people like myself, can get on the bandwagon and we can say, he's wrong, cancel him. But again, my Christian faith, the Christian faith, the Christian faith said to me, he that is without sin, cast the first stone. And Lord, if night were to turn today, my sins would be higher than the wall that is behind me. It means that I am, per the teachings of my Savior, I am in no position to cast a stone. I am, however, in a position to ask some questions and to share my feelings about it. But when we think of the Black community, when we think of Black men, and Will Smith said something similar to this, and I don't want to borrow any of his words. He said it when he was receiving his Oscar. When we think of the Black community and we think of Black men, for years and years, centuries, generations, we have been demonized, demasculated, ostracized, abused, criticized. And we have to hold all of that. And then that's the wider society. And then when you come into our community, we're expected to show up a certain kind of way. We're expected to have our turf, and nobody crosses over on my turf. Because if you do, you're going to get knocked. We are expected to protect those that we say we love. And our manhood, our masculinity, toxic as it may be, requires us to stick our chest out and deepen our voice and raise our fist if someone violates. And so I wonder what the violation was and is. But even more so, I wonder for us, have we ever been violated? And how did we respond? That is the thing for me. That's the thing that I find myself thinking about for the last week or so. When I heard of the Oscars 10-year ban, I'm like, okay, it's no big deal. They never liked the Oscars anyway, yada, 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 yada. But then I started thinking about, and I just learned actually today that he has received a ton of movie roles since that. But he's also lost, or at least put on pause, a series of projects that he really wanted to do. Does the punishment suit the crime? But even more so, as a person of faith, this is connecting through faith and how our faith requires us to show up in the moment. Even more than does the punishment suit the crime, I wonder, how does grace require us to respond? I'm going to tell you how grace showed up when that happened. Think of Chris Rock. Think of another Black man. Again, the Black man has always been ostracized, demonized, criticized, abused, ridiculed, you name it. A Black man in that moment, in front of millions of people, a wife and children, siblings, friends, loved ones, family, was humiliated and disrespected in the lowest form you can think of in the Black community. Now, let me tell you something about the Black community. When a Black woman spits in another Black woman's face, honey, somebody's going to prison and somebody's going to the morgue today. We don't play that. When a Black man slaps another Black man in the face, I want to say that's a move. You know what I mean? That's a B move. You know what I mean? That's so dehumanizing and demasculating. But I'm going to tell you what I saw in the moment. I saw grace showed up in one of the purest and most realistic form I've ever seen it, when Chris Rock held himself together and said, "And I won't anymore," when Will Smith says, "Don't speak about my wife." Oh my God. Now listen, that could have gone many different ways. He could have gotten a fight and it would be, yep, we can't take them nowhere. But I don't want to get into the Oscar conversation. I want to keep us focused on the bigger picture which is the example that was set for our community, for other young black men who were looking on and saw Chris Rock handle himself in such a dignified way, but greater than that, saw him express grace to a fellow black man who, by all stretch of the imagination, just violated his personal space. It was beautiful. It wasn't when I just saw it. It wasn't a few days after. I was outraged. I was angry. But as I thought about it, I'm like, look at grace, God, and faith all working in this moment, in that moment. Now, to put a wrap on this, I have had moments where I felt violated. I felt laughed at, ridiculed, whatever. And I've had moments where I've responded the way Will Smith has responded, physical and all. I've also had moments where I'm on the other side of Will Smith's response. And I've had moments where I respond the way Chris Rock responded, but I've had moments where I couldn't. My question, or my thing to us today, is how does your moral compass, how does your faith inspire you daily, today, when you were driving and someone cut you off and then pull up next to you at the stoplight? Yesterday when you were in the line and someone said something mean or nasty behind you, or the cashier looked at you a certain kind of way. Tomorrow morning when you're walking on the street and someone passed you and utters something that's just mean and painful and hateful. Next week when you're sitting at the airport and someone does something, how are you inspired to respond? How are you guided to respond? That is my plug for today. And with that, I want to transition to connecting, the connection. Again, my producer is not very happy because I don't get the segments right, but the connection. So, the connection. Now, the connection usually is where I would connect with a guest, have these deep, meaningful conversations about whatever the topic of the day is, however your faith or that guests see faith connecting us and requiring us to respond and showing up and calling us to certain spaces. But this being the first episode, I think it's, a little more organic for you to connect with me. And so there's no guest today, there's just me. And I wanted to take some time to share with you just a little bit about who I am, my journey, and what got me to this place where I am sitting on a screen in your living room, in your car, wherever you are viewing this, on your radio, talking to you. Just so you will get an understanding, a little bit of a clearer or deeper understanding as to who I am as an individual. Now, at the top of our show, I introduced myself as the Reverend Andre Bennett. That is, in fact, true. I am an ordained minister. I have been ordained for many years. I was first licensed when I was 18 years old, many moons ago. And was ordained about 7 years later at the age of 25 years old. I am from Jamaica. I came to this country 13 years ago. Wow, this month is my 13th anniversary of being here in the United States of America. And I live in the New England area, and I serve my current congregation I've been serving for the last 10 years. And I currently serve as the pastor for youth and young adults because I just love youth leadership and youth development, because I felt like people took the time to invest in my development and pave the way for me and, put my first mic in my hand or my first book in my hand or whatever it is that caused me to become who I am today. Um, and it took me a while, really, to respond to this call, the call for a podcast. And why I say it took me a while, this has been something that has been impressed upon me for a very long time, but I am not the guy for the limelight. And I know that, I know that my work, and just, from what is visible on social media, it looks very differently. But you hear the saying, like, don't believe the hype on social media. Don't believe what all the things that you see on social media. It's just a snippet of who an individual is. It's just that my life's mission and my purpose, what I believed I'm called to do, so happen to cause me to always, or for the most part, be in the forefront, in front of the camera. But it's not necessarily my desire. And there was, about 2 years ago, something came to me in the wee hours of the morning. There are all kinds of conversations happening in every kind of spaces, and especially since the murder of George Floyd, like, this country has gotten to a place of racial reckoning, and there's been social media stuff and influencers and this and that, and something came to me about, what about the perspective of faith? Laws are being passed, laws are being debated. We are seeing divides in this country like we've never seen before, or maybe we have seen before, I don't know, but I've never seen before. We are seeing people coming out from all the woodworks and some things that just do not sound or sit well with us. And then, it forces you to question how you show up. And there are all kinds of conversations happening, and we look in every which direction. But something keeps in the back of my mind asking, what about our faith? We, for the most part, are people of faith. And those of us who do not have a faith or profess a faith, we are, for the most part, guided by our moral compass. Now, whether that moral compass is good, bad, or indifferent, that's another conversation. That's probably another podcast. But we're guided by our moral compass, those of us who do not profess a faith. And those of us who do profess a faith, who belong to a faith or a tribe, a tribal practice, whatever it is, whatever our tradition is. What about that perspective? When we debate the laws, when we debate what's happening in pop culture, when we look at what's happening in our communities, how we show up, where is the conversation about the role that faith, or moral compass plays in all of this? And so for 2 years, I wrestled with this, and finally I gave in. And I decided, let's connect through faith. Let's bring together people from all walks of life, people from all levels of profession, academics, no profession, non-academias, people who have lived, have experienced, people who are ordinary, everyday people who just know what is right and know what is wrong, know how to do right and know when they see wrong, how to speak out on it. Let's have these conversations. Let's have these thought-provoking conversations. Let's have these meaningful conversations. Let's have these disagreements. Let's take some time to find out, why does Reverend Andre Bennett think the way he thinks, acts the way he acts, behaves the way he behaves? What is driving that? Let's have the conversation as to why Reverend Andre Bennett worships on a Sunday, goes to church religiously every Sunday morning. What inspires that? And maybe we'll understand why then Reverend Andre Bennett supports the things that Reverend Andre Bennett supports or denounces the things that he denounces. I think it's a unique opportunity for us to connect through faith. I think it's a unique opportunity for us to educate each other about our faith. I think it is a unique opportunity for us to learn more and be able to see the world from a perspective of faith. That's why this time, that's why now, that's why we are connected through faith. And now, my connecting thoughts. There's a quote that I absolutely love. And I know she got it from somewhere. It wasn't an original to my grandmother. But the first person I heard said this was my grandmother. Faith will take you where grace will keep you. So strong. Faith will take you where grace will keep you. I remember the first time I heard that. I remember exactly what I was doing, where I was at, what I was wearing. I can almost smell what was happening. And I was 13 years old. I was in high school back home, and I was having the most difficult time in high school. You see, I was bullied in high school a lot. I was a really good student, but I started having suicidal thoughts, ideations that led to attempts. And my grandmother did not know that nobody knew I was having these ideations. Kids used to make all kinds of fun of me in school. And one day I came home and the ideation turned into an attempt. A failed attempt, a botched attempt, but an attempt nonetheless, to take my own life. Because it had become so much. I never quite fit in to the society or the societal norms. I spoke differently. I had what sounded like a different accent. I was always my own individual. I was always my own independent person. I always had a million questions. I wanted answers. I would research. I would debate, all of that. And I just didn't quite fit in. I didn't fit in with friends. Teachers were a little bit annoyed of me because I'm always correcting or checking them. I was the youngest of all my siblings, and I just didn't quite feel like I had a place at home either. And so I was now living with my grandmother, and my uncle was going through some stuff. And that day I made an attempt to take my own life. And my grandmother came and found me. Well, the neighbor found me first and brought me to my grandmother. And, from the Caribbean, in the old country, we get whooped. Parents beat us when we do things. And so, back then in Jamaica, I don't think they understood that it was a cry for help. They just thought I was just being this badass kid or whatever, ungrateful kid. So this neighbor found me because I would try to, hang myself on a mango tree, and I jumped and the branch broke and I fell. And I fell hard because I went way up high. I fell hard and I was crying, and he came and he picked me up and angrily brought me to my grandmother, and he was telling my grandmother her name was Catherine Green. And they all called her Miss Green. And he's like, Miss Green, you should beat this boy, because what if something more serious had happened? And, just the whole thing. And after he left, my grandmother and I started talking. And again, I didn't understand and I didn't appreciate how ahead of her years she really was in her time. She asked me a lot of questions about the incident and what led me there. And after I shared and I bore my soul to her, and I was crying and she was crying, and she's a praying person, so she prayed and she prayed and she prayed, and I was telling her that I wanted to quit school. I didn't want to go back to school. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to live. And she mustered up some words under all of that crying and praying that she was doing. And they call me Leighton for short, for my alias at home. And she said to me, Leighton, you need to have faith in your God. She said, whoever or whatever your God is, you need to have faith in your God. She said, your God did not give you life for any reason. Your God has a plan for your life. And then she said, faith will take you where grace will keep you. Something about that hit me really, really hard in the moment. Faith will take you where grace will keep you. It is by faith that we operate on a daily basis. Now, this podcast is not meant to be a preacher's outlet. It's not meant to be a mini sermon or a sermonette. But because this is our first conversation, I wanted to give you a clear perspective of where I come from, how I show up in the world. When I go to a march, when I stand on a stage to speak, when I show up at meetings, when I show up for conversations, it is my faith that gets me there. It is my faith that caused me to believe that someday racism will be a thing of the past. It is my faith that caused me to believe that someday the black man will be looked upon as equal and he will no longer be seen as angry and rageful and people have to clutch their purses when they see him. It is faith that caused me to believe that we will in fact realize the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King, where we live in a world where people are judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin or their zip code or their social economic status. It is faith that caused me to show up at these Black Lives Matter events and these fair housing events and these marches and these protests and demonstration for equal rights and justice, for equality and equity. It is faith that caused me to get up and sit before you on this camera, to talk to you, to bear myself to you, to invite you into my world. And that faith has taken me to a place where grace is keeping me. Grace, when someone drives by me and winds their window down and shout, "Go back to your country," grace caused me to smile or to give them the praying hands. When someone flips me off, grace caused me to nod. When someone asks me if I belong here or tells me that I don't look like I am Reverend Doctor or Reverend this or whatever, grace keeps a smile on my face. Grace keeps me believing that things will change. Grace keeps me believing that we can have these conversations where we will never agree, but we will disagree respectfully and peacefully. So in my closing thoughts, I want to leave you with these words. Faith will take you where grace will keep you. Thank you for tuning in to Connecting Through Faith. Please be sure to like, follow us, and comment. Follow us on all social media platforms. We are on Facebook. Send us a friend request at Connecting Through Faith. We are on Instagram, Connecting Through Faith. Like and follow us. We are on Twitter, Connecting Through Faith. Like and follow us. We are on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, iHeartRadio. We are on every major and minor social media platform and communication platform. Be sure to follow us. Be sure to like us. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have letters that you'd like to send us, if you have topics that you'd like us to discuss or guests that you'd like to see on the show, please send us an email at connectingthroughfaith@gmail.com. Connecting Through Faith, one word, ConnectingThroughFaith@gmail.com. All support is welcome and greatly appreciated, and we will do our best to accommodate every request that we get as much as time allows us and it is humanly possible for us to do. Again, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day, and let us continue connecting through faith.